Alrighty, you guys, what's going on? Welcome into the SFS studio here for another fantasy Q&A. Week 15 action here. Big news today coming out of New Orleans. Drew Brees is going to be suiting up and starting for the Saints against the Chiefs this weekend. So obviously that has some major fantasy implications there. But I think that, honestly, this is huge news for Alvin Kamara owners, even more so than Drew Brees owners. We're going to end up seeing Alvin Kamara see a huge increase in his reception volume and have a very, very nice role in that offense now. Obviously, with Taysom Hill off the field, we saw that role decline a little bit. But I think with Brees back here in the lineup, we are going to see a lot more receptions out of Kamara this week. And then for Michael Thomas, I think that his ceiling increases now with Brees at the helm. It's probably going to be a high score against Kansas City this week. So I think that Drew Brees, Saints offensive players, all trending up this week. So with that stuff being said and getting that out of the way, I'm going to get into your guys' questions here. So thank you, all of you guys popping on the stream. First question up is we've got Drew Brees or Ryan Tannehill this week. And I think, honestly, even off of some missed games here, Drew Brees might be your better option to go with. Kansas City is a pretty darn good, solid defensive unit. But I think Drew Brees, that offense is still going to exploit them and put up some points. And last year, we saw Drew Brees miss some time, and he looked pretty bad. His arm looked a little bit weak. He comes back off the injury rested. He's an older quarterback. You get that rest in him, he's going to look like himself in a much younger version of him. So I expect some more zip behind Brees' balls. I expect some accuracy, and I expect, like I said, in a high-scoring game, Drew Brees will be very fantasy relevant this week. What's going on, Alex? Thanks for stopping by the stream, man. What's up, Niels? Thank you for coming by. Deshaun Watson or Jalen Hurts this week? That's a tough one. I mean, when you look at the Texans, we saw Deshaun Watson against the Colts the first time around this season. He put up a pretty nice amount of yards. D-Watt went for 341 yards, but he only had one rushing touchdown, and he had two total turnovers on the day. So he only netted 18 fantasy points. And then Jalen Hurts, I think, has a pretty darn good matchup against the Cardinals this week. They're definitely not a terrible defensive unit, but they're a unit that can be exploited. So I think, to be honest, I might go with Jalen Hurts here. I still think there's not very much tape out there on him in NFL uniforms. So obviously with no preseason, they only really have that New Orleans game from last week to look at. I think the matchup is better for Hurts. They both have really nice rushing volume. And while both of these guys don't really have much for wide receivers on their team, I think that the tight ends for Hurts in particular can pick up the slack. So I'd expect a really nice game out of Hurts in that Eagles offense. T.Y. Gallman, Wilson at flex. I think of your options, if you're in a PPR league, I might lean towards T.Y. Hilton. But if you want to stay for standard option, Jasper, I think Wayne Gallman is a great play for you. What's going on, Paige? Thanks for coming on the stream here. Jeff Wilson, yeah, I got you, man. I'm thinking Gallman for standard leagues this week. Or T.Y. Hilton in PPR. I think T.Y. has a massive ceiling, but just based off of his collective season here, a little bit more risky, although he is on quite the hot streak right now. Drop Julio for Devontae Parker. Travis, I think you're best suited here if you stick around with Julio Jones, despite the fact that we don't know if we're going to see him here the rest of the season. Devontae Parker's a nice piece in your lineup, but ultimately I think that Julio Jones is too invaluable to pass up and potentially risk someone else getting him. So we might see him shut down. We might not see him again this year. But Julio, I think, is worth stashing on your bench just in case. McLaurin or A.J. Brown this week? I'm going to say go with A.J. Brown. I think both of these guys have really nice matchups. I think A.J. Brown can do really, really great against that Lions defense. And I think Terry can against the Seahawks as well. But 2 back-to-back down weeks for McLaurin. And Dwayne Haskins is actually the starter for Washington this week as the calf is holding Alex Smith out of this week's game. So I think you go A.J. Brown here, especially if we don't see Matt Stafford in that game. I think that the overall time that he's going to get relevant snaps in, at least for passing downs, might be limited. But I think that they will possess the football a lot, and Tennessee will control that game. So A.J. Brown should have some nice opportunities, especially off play action if Derrick Henry sets him up real nice. PPR League, would you play Landry, Hines, or Dobbins in the flex this week? So Jarvis has the Giants. Naheem Hines is going up against the Texans, and J.K. Dobbins is going up against the Jaguars. I think that this is a bit of a tough one for me. I like Hines as kind of a streamer type play, but I think J.K. Dobbins is the way to go here. I mean, he's got the lead back role in that Ravens offense. He's very talented, extremely explosive, and I think that for your team, Alex, he can get some really nice things done for you, especially if he finds the end zone. So, and then Jose is wondering if he should start J.K. Dobbins over Miles Sanders. I think this is a bit of a toss-up here. These are both slightly risky players. J.K. Dobbins, obviously really explosive. So is Miles Sanders. I would say the one thing in the way of J.K. Dobbins' production is Lamar Jackson pulling the ball and keeping it, and just keeping some touches away from him. And then Miles Sanders, it's just the Philadelphia Eagles are his biggest enemy. His own team is really what prevents him from producing. But with Hurts last week, he was great. The first 100-yard rusher against the Saints defense in 55 games, which is a little over 3 years. So I actually said probably about mid-season, keep that matchup on your schedule circled there, because I thought Miles Sanders could potentially be the first guy to do that, and he ended up doing it after I had bailed on him the week prior because of those inconsistent games. But I think ultimately I might roll the dice on Sanders. Both are a bit risky, but I like them overall. DJ Moore, Cole Beasley, or Corey Davis this week. I'm going to have to say, honestly, I would feel most comfortable, I think, if this is a full PPR league, probably going the route of Cole Beasley. I mean, the Bills, I forget who Buffalo is playing this week, but the Broncos, yeah, even more fuel to the fire there. Cole Beasley against the Broncos can put up some really nice numbers. I like the targets, the receptions he gets in that offense. Josh Allen really trusts him, and I think for a guy who we've seen him go really under the radar this season, for the longest time he was barely owned in fantasy leagues, and finally here down the stretch that number's picking up. But Beasley, he gets a lot of receptions. We've seen him have 2 massive games this season, and I think he's probably your most dependable play of the 3. I mean, DJ Moore maybe has the highest ceiling, but coming off the COVID list, potentially seeing shadow coverage from Jair Alexander might be a tough matchup for him. Pick 3 this week for Austin, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, Brandon Ayuk, or A-Rob in full PPR. And this is one heck of a decision, Austin. You've got some really good options here. I think that ultimately I'm going to have to say that A-Rob needs to be in your lineup, especially in full PPR. I really, really like Ayuk this week against the Cowboys. I think that maybe that's your flex play. And then at running back, I think of the 3, I like Akers the best. I really like Dobbins and Swift's talents, but with the possibility that Stafford doesn't suit up this week, I think that can really eat into DeAndre Swift's value and that Lions offense as a whole. So I think I'm going to end up going with Akers here. I think the Rams can blow out the Jets, maintain time of possession, control that football game, and just run the football down their throats. So Akers, Ayuk, and A-Rob are my 3. Who is the best defense this year? Eric is wondering. I think that the best defense for 2020, in terms of a fantasy defense, maybe the Rams or the Dolphins, and I would say an actual defense, it's pretty darn close there too. I mean, we've seen the Rams, they've got their 2 studs, they've got Jalen Ramsey, they've got Aaron Donald kind of anchoring things down, and their supporting cast is excellent as well. So I think that's a great way to go about things there. And then Miami, Xavier Howard's a ball hawk right now. That team is getting sacks off the edge, and Brian Flores is doing a great job. So I think in terms of fantasy and real team defense, those guys are both really solid. I loved Indianapolis early on in the season, but they've kind of fallen off a bit. Washington football team is another team to look at there too as well. Really, really good front 7 in Washington. Rank these 3 running backs rest of season: Gallman, Mostert, and Dobbins. Ethan, I think I'm going to have to go with J.K. Dobbins ahead of the first 2. So in my first place spot, I'd give it to J.K. Dobbins. Super explosive, really talented. Love the Ravens schedule here down the stretch. At 2, I'd go Wayne Gallman. I really like Wayne Gallman as a safe floor play and a guy who, when he is the starter in New York, has been very, very productive. And then Mostert was an RB1 type player at the beginning of the season, but those injuries have derailed him here. He's not showing as much explosion, and he's being very injury prone. So Mostert, I love him as a talent. He absolutely smoked my Packers. Obviously, you can see in the background here, I'm a Packer fan. He absolutely cooked us in the NFC Championship game last season, but he just hasn't been able to stay on the field this year. So, and with some imaging being done on his ankle right now, I'd be a little bit hesitant there. Travis wants to know A-Rob, Akers, or Ayuk this week. If it's full PPR, I think I'm going to advise you to go probably with A-Rob as the safest floor guy, who always has a nice ceiling as well. But, you know, if you're in a standard league, or if you're just looking for some huge upside, I think Ayuk is your way to go here against Dallas this week. We've seen his last 5 games he's played be highly productive, and he's just been a really nice fantasy asset. Let me know, guys, in the chat if my stream is buffering. I moved my studio to a different room a couple days ago, and my stream connection has not been quite as good since I moved it. So based on what I saw from my other stream, my audio was good throughout, but the picture was a little bit choppy, which is unfortunate. So I'll look into a way to fix that if we're still having that issue. YouTube's telling me right now my bit rate for the stream is a little bit down. So back into questions, though. Cam Akers or Chris Carson this week? I think, Braden, I'm going to go with Cam Akers. I really love Chris Carson. He's been a highly utilized guy in that Seahawks offense, a very, very high volume guy. But the last 3 weeks here, the touches are down just a little bit. And against Washington's front 7, that's a pretty darn tough matchup. So I'd be careful with Carson this week. And I love Cam Akers against the Jets, albeit their D-line is the strength of that defense. People were telling me to play Hurts over Herbert. You know, Travis, I could see where they're coming from. I probably would have said go Herbert. I loved the matchup, and especially with Williams and Allen being on the field, although they didn't play much last night, I still thought Herbert was the way to go for a lot of teams. Hurts has a nice ceiling as well. That rushing value is going to give him some nice production, but Herbert is probably, at the end of the day, going to be the guy who had the better numbers. Reed is wondering about DeAndre Swift, Justin Jefferson, or Calvin Ridley this week. I think Reed, I'm going to end up having to go. I think I was just texting you about this on Instagram a little while ago. But I think I ended up choosing Calvin Ridley against Tampa because that defense has shown the ability that they will give up stuff over the top. Carlton Davis started off really strong, but it's kind of fallen off a bit here. Julio Jones as well, officially out for this game. So we'll maybe not even seeing him the rest of the season, but he will certainly not be out there in Week 15. So I would go Ridley there. Pick 2, Cam Akers, Aaron Jones, A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders. Drew, I've got you covered, man. I think this is a tough choice. You've got some really good options here. I love A.J. Brown. I think against the Lions, he's got a great ceiling, and I would keep that up in your lineups there. I'm starting A.J. Brown in all leagues this week. And then I think that last spot for me comes down to Aaron Jones or Cam Akers because I think Miles Sanders is the more risky of the bunch. I love all their ceilings, but I think this week, I think he might have to go with Cam Akers. I mean, Green Bay's got a short week playing Carolina, pretty decent front. They're not the best unit in the world. They've shown they can get run on at times this season. But, Aaron Jones, the touchdown production from last season has been almost sliced in half, which is what's really holding him back in fantasy this year. So with Akers on the rise right now, 2 back-to-back 20-plus touch games, I think that's the way you go for a safe floor play paired with a super high ceiling in A.J. Brown. Bobby would like me to bench 1. He wants Robert Woods, Adam Thielen, or Justin Jefferson. I think that of those 3, you bench Adam Thielen. My reasoning behind this is last time against Chicago, we saw Justin Jefferson benefit with a safer floor because he had more volume. He had 8 for 135. And then we saw Adam Thielen, I believe, only have 40 yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns. And obviously, touchdown-dependent plays, a little bit more risky in fantasy, and something you try to stay away from. Obviously, it's a great bonus in matchups, but not something you want to hang your hat on as a fantasy player. He only had 4 grabs, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Chicago. So touchdowns are great, but if you take even one of those off, it's a modest performance. So I think I would stick with Jefferson, and maybe we see an increase in his production there, and then Robert Woods has a safe floor. So Adam Thielen's the odd man out for me. Akers or Sanders in your flex. James, I think you go with Cam Akers this week. I love Miles Sanders. He's been one of my favorite players all season long. But with just the inconsistency in that Philly offense, we need to see one more week before he's a must-start player again. And Cam Akers is running a 3-game hot streak, so I think you got to go with Cam Akers here. Manage your risk in these big games here in fantasy. Swift, Diggs, and D-Hop, pick 2. Joseph, I got you covered, man. I think that you want to start Diggs and D-Hop this week. Cardinals have the Eagles. Darius Slay, their top corner. He's pretty darn good. He's talented, but he's been getting fried the last couple weeks here by Metcalf, Adams. D-Hop's another one of the league's top receivers. He's going to do great in that matchup. And Kyler Murray has been showing the ability that despite that shoulder injury, he is still going to force-feed D-Hop the ball and get him his production and his numbers. So no worries about D-Hop anymore the rest of the season for me. I was hesitant and cautious with him last week, and he went off against the Giants. So D-Hop's definitely a guy who deserves lineup play. And then Diggs against Denver. It's too easy. I like Swift a lot as well, but especially they're still managing back into that offense with that concussion. He only had 11 touches, I believe, last week, but then he still had 50 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown, but you'd like to see him get back to that 20 range before starting him. Thank you. Yeah, no problem, Travis. Let me know if you have any more questions. I'll get to you guys. Is Swift going to be good this week? So I think that if Matthew Stafford plays, he will certainly be a lot better than he would without him on the field. Obviously, Matt Stafford has not practiced yet this week, and is a guy that his head coach, Darrell Bevell, right now, the interim coach after Patricia got fired, talked about how he would be completely okay with Stafford starting that game without a single practice under his belt this week. So to answer your question, will Swift be good or not? I think it's a bit of a coin flip. In terms of talent and production, what he can do against that Titans team, yeah, he can have a great day. He has a massive ceiling, I think, this week. We've seen teams all year long run against the Titans. In particular, the short, shifty backs like Nyheim Hines types have had really big days against the Titans, and that's exactly what Swift is. He's a short, stocky, compact little guy, very physical, very elusive, and I think that he's got a really nice upside. But like I said, if that concussion still plays a factor in how much they give him the football, I think that can limit his production here, and we might see a little bit of a shaky floor. So I love Swift, but not sure how safe he is. If Mostert doesn't play, Jeff Wilson, this is from Miles McKee. If Mostert does not play, Jeff Wilson, CEH, Godwin, Deontay in the flex. It depends on your scoring format, Miles. I think that if you're in a standard league, I would lean going the safe route with the lead tailback for the 49ers, which is expected to be Jeff Wilson. I'm not expecting Mostert to be on the field this week. But I think in a PPR league, there's a really, really strong scenario and case here to be made for Chris Godwin despite the lack of production last week. I mean, Atlanta, one of the bottom units in the league in the secondary, so I think Godwin can have a really nice game there. Or even Deontay Johnson bouncing back is a nice candidate to be in the flex as well as the most targeted Steelers wide receiver in a favorable matchup against the Bengals. Basically, the one guy I would not start there, Miles, if I had to, that would be my strongest advice would be don't start Clyde Edwards against the Saints because I think his only value this week is as a receiver because that front is so elite at stopping inside run. PPR at running back, we've got Lynn Bowden, David Johnson, or Gus Edwards. I think that David Johnson, what's the news on David Johnson? So David Johnson has returned to the team, and he is available and active. He's been practicing, so I think that he certainly could be in your list of players, but in full PPR, if we don't see Myles Gaskin this week, I think Lynn Bowden, the leading routes run guy for that Dolphins offense, I think is probably your best route there. Steven, he says, hi, Gavin, Ridley, Metcalf, Hilton, and Godwin in half PPR. Pick two, please. This week, man, I think you got to go with your safest options. I love Godwin. I love what he can do for Tom Brady, and I love what he is as a player. But I think with Julio out of the lineup, Ridley is going to for sure get his looks, so you got to put him in. And then DK Metcalf, a guy you have to start as well. So I'd go with those two there. I love Hilton's ceiling, but he hasn't been consistent the entire season like we've seen these other guys be. So in terms of how elite your players are already, I'd give him the bump out of there, but a great flex option. And then Godwin, it's just a matter of if Tom Brady gets him the ball enough or not. But I think your safest options are Metcalf and Ridley. Brandon is wondering about Kenyon Drake or J.K. Dobbins in full PPR. I think that this week, I think you still go with Kenyon Drake. While we saw Kyler Murray's numbers go up last week for rushing attempts, Drake is still getting those touchdowns, and that gives him a really safe floor. I mean, Dobbins for sure has the higher ceiling. I would say he is more explosive by far, a better running back talent, certainly. But I think in this situation, just with the amount of volume we're seeing Drake get on the goal line, how we're seeing him be used with Kyler Murray's a little bit limitations in his throwing shoulder, I think that he's a guy who is actually increased in value for me. Start one, Jonathan Taylor Swift, Jefferson, or Deontay Johnson. You got to start JT this week. He's been excellent the last 2 weeks. He had back-to-back career days where he one-upped himself. From week 13, he had his career day, and then week 14, he one-upped it. So Jonathan Taylor has also already played the Texans this season, and that was that week 13 game, which he did very well. 13 carries, 91 yards, and then 3 catches, 44 yards, and a touchdown. I think something we're not talking about with Jonathan Taylor enough is the elite production he can give you as a receiver. I mean, at Wisconsin, he did not do much of catching the football, but in the NFL, they are giving him chances on screen passes in Indianapolis, and he's being very effective. And when he gets in the open field, running downhill with a head of steam, watch out because he's going to blow someone off their heels and just completely run through defenses. So JT, great matchup, great talent. I think he's going to do some big things here in the fantasy playoffs. How's it going, man? Fantasy Geek Freaks, glad to see you stop by the stream, man. Pick up Cam Akers or Tyler Boyd, Deontay Johnson, or Ayuk. If Cam Akers is on your waiver wire, I'd absolutely go snatch him up right now. This one's for King Jonathan. I think that running backs are the most valuable and hardest position to come by in fantasy. So if you can find a high-level producer or a starting-level player, which Cam Akers absolutely is, you need to go pick him up. But otherwise, I like Ayuk rest of season out of those three wide receivers, if you don't end up picking up Akers or have a second spot to fill. This week against Dallas, he's got a crazy high ceiling. So, yeah. Fantasy Geek Freak says he finally made it to one of my Q&As. Glad you're here, man. Happy to have you around. Glad you're tuning in and watching. Means a lot to me, my man. Daffy is wondering about Titans, Bills, or Cardinals defense this week. So Titans has the Lions. I think you might lock in the Titans, honestly, if Stafford doesn't play. I think it's a different story, though, if he does not. Otherwise, I really like Buffalo against the Broncos. Drew Lock's turned the football over at a high rate this year, so I definitely think that Buffalo, without the Titans in the picture, is the best option there. Obviously, the Titans comes down to whether or not we see Chase Daniel or Stafford at quarterback, though. Infinite Strength is wondering about starting DK Metcalf or Corey Davis. I think this is a tough matchup for Metcalf, but I wouldn't go so drastic as to start Davis. I mean, Corey Davis is solid. He's a bit streaky at times, and I think that he's a pretty darn good talent, obviously being a top-end first-round pick once upon a time in his career. But Metcalf, he's been too productive this season. Wilson's going to give him his looks, and I think it actually might play to his benefit. Wilson's going to have to get out of the pocket and escape pressures, and I think we're going to see some balls floated up there to Metcalf down the field. Pick one, Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, T.Y. Hilton. I think with seeing Drew Brees come back, you got to go with MT here. MT, a great talent. Obviously, wide receiver 1 overall last year, set the record for most receptions in a single season. You got to go with MT. It's going to be a high-scoring game. Brees needs to put up points. Kamara and MT are high-end top overall players at their positions this week. Green Bay, Titans, or Bills defense. Daffy, I think you asked a similar question here. You just added the Packers in there. I'm still going to say go with the Bills unless the Titans are playing a Stafford-less Lions team. Reed is wondering about trading DK Metcalf for Aaron Jones or Keenan Allen for Austin Eckler. You know, man, Reed, let me know who your running backs are at the moment and what your position group is looking like there. I would hate to see you give up one of those top-end wide receivers. I mean, Keenan Allen's the most targeted guy in the league right now at the wide receiver position, and DK Metcalf has been pretty darn good as well on his receptions. So Aaron Jones, a running back I love, but he's not finding the end zone as much, and Austin Eckler is a really good guy in PPR, but just not quite what I think they once were. Cooper or Deontay Johnson, I think, let's see. So LA this week is playing the Jets, and Deontay Johnson has the Bengals. I think you got to go with Deontay Johnson here. I mean, especially in full PPR. Both of these guys are highly targeted. They are both very trusted by their quarterbacks. Even though we saw Deontay Johnson struggle a lot last week, Deontay still leads the team in targets by a mile. So I go Deontay Johnson this week. I think he can bounce back. Woods or DJ Moore, half PPR. I'm going to go with Robert Woods. Safer floor here. DJ Moore coming off the COVID list this week. And potentially, I'm not sure how it's going to pan out. Either him or Robbie Anderson is going to see a lot of coverage from Jair Alexander on the Packers, one of the top corners in the league this year, and a guy who's been shut down at times. So DJ Moore might have to shake off some rust. Robbie Anderson's the favorite target to begin with, so I think that's something you stay away from. What are my thoughts on MT this week? I think this week MT is going to be fairly productive. I mean, we haven't seen him find the end zone yet this year. He's got Drew Brees coming back for him this week, so I think there's a couple things going for him. I mean, obviously, the more and more football he plays, the more accustomed he's going to get to the game. I think the more integrated he'll become in that offense. Obviously, last year, like I just said, probably a couple minutes ago, most receptions in a single season last year. Wide receiver 1 overall in PPR in 2019. The guy can get the numbers. It's just a matter of actually getting it done. And I think against the Chiefs, a really good matchup. They're a somewhat tough defense, but New Orleans has to score points. They don't necessarily try and throw the ball down the field, so we're going to see a ton of targets for him, lots of slant routes, lots of out routes. If you guys are into some Michael Thomas slander, you might think that's a little bit funny, but yeah, I think MT is going to be a pretty darn good safe wide receiver in Week 15 here, especially in PPR. Evan Ingram or Dallas Goedert this week. I like both of these guys a lot. Both of them are in my top 12 for tight ends the rest of this season. But I think this week we got to go with Evan Ingram. I mean, I think he's the best pass catcher on the Giants football team right now. And playing the Browns, they are one of the worst defenses at covering the tight ends. So when you combine talent, Daniel Jones is trusting them. He's actually questionable right now, but I think he will suit up and play. And then when you just look at, like I said, matchup, talent, situation, I think Ingram's in a good spot this week. Goddard I really like too, but we're really still trying to figure out who Hurts' go-to guy is right now, I think. One game sample size isn't quite enough to see. How do I rank Kamara among running backs this week? That's a great question, man. I think that with Brees coming back, he certainly puts himself right into that top 3, top 2 type players. I still think I'd go with Derrick Henry over him. He's been my running back 1 for quite some time now, and I think D-Rock is probably going to repeat as the back-to-back rushing title holder. But Kamara, the receptions are going to go up. Drew Brees throws him the football a ton, and I think that's going to be a really, really great option for you guys. Alvin Kamara, I was not for sitting him earlier this season when some people were, but now with Brees in the lineup, absolutely no question, you got to start him. Trade DK for D-Hop. Reed, it's a tough one, but I think I'd still hang on and just sit tight on DK. I love both of these guys. They're both highly productive. Maybe you favor DK slightly more in standard leagues because he's kind of your less volume type player, but the bigger hits down the field and touchdown type producer, whereas D-Hop's going to be the guy that just gets peppered by Kyler Murray, has a lot of receptions and has a lot of yards, but both of those guys are so good. They have about equally tough schedules here down the stretch. Both of them have to play the Rams and Jalen Ramsey once on the schedule. Obviously, DK has the Washington football team defense this week, which might be a bit of a red flag, but I think they're pretty evenly matched here the rest of the season. Kareem Hunt or Nyheim Hines, I'm assuming this is for this week. Hines has the Texans, who he had a touchdown against the last time out, but wasn't really all that productive in his actual yardage count. Or Kareem Hunt coming off a white-hot performance, but going up against the Giants this week. It's a tough one. I think these are both nice flex plays, but I think you got to ride the wave here with Kareem Hunt. I mean, we know what he can do with the football in his hands, and especially if he gets that receiving volume, he's going to be highly productive. 6 for 33 and a touchdown, and then 6 for 77 through the air and a touchdown against the Ravens. Maybe against Jacksonville this week. That's for the Ravens. Maybe against the Giants this week, not quite as much of a need to throw. I don't think that's going to be as highly of a contested scoring outing as we saw from the Ravens and the Browns on Monday night, but I still think Hunt has some lineup value. Terry, T.Y., or Gallman for Jasper. I think that I would ultimately go probably Terry here if this is PPR, but if you need a safe play, I think Gallman's the way to go. I actually really like all three of these guys. I think the biggest issue with Terry is the consistency we've seen the last 2 weeks here. Before that, he was no question the starter you go with in this scenario. T.Y. Hilton before 3 weeks ago wasn't even a lineup option or being considered in most leagues. Wayne Gallman, though, has been pretty darn consistent here the whole season. And I think it's just a matter of your scoring format and what you really are looking for. If you want that high ceiling, maybe you go T.Y. If you're looking for a safer option, I'd say Gallman, especially in non-PPR leagues, is the way to go. But Terry is a little bit mix of both. He's probably got a safe floor. His former Ohio State quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, will be taking over the starting job this week. And so I think he'll get his looks for sure against what was a pretty darn awful Seahawks defense earlier this year. Brees will be playing this week. Yes, he will be. He is the starting quarterback for the Saints this week against the Chiefs. I really like that matchup. I think he should come out rested. Obviously, nothing was wrong with his throwing arm, throwing shoulder. It was a rib injury, broken ribs. So I think he'll come out firing early. Swift, Jefferson, or Wilson at flex this week. I really like Jefferson against the Bears as a PPR lineup play. I think Jeff Wilson is a great standard option. Like Godwin as well. You add in there in the next comment. I think I'd go with Jefferson, though, over all those guys because I'm pretty sure your league is PPR. What are my thoughts on Russell Gage? I think Russell Gage is a pretty talented player. He's had his flashes, his moments this season. He hasn't been the most consistent guy in the world. And at a time, I think we actually saw Olamide Zaccheaus take over some of his reps, which was a little bit frustrating because I had to go out and stream Russell Gage. But he started off the season pretty hot. I don't remember all of his numbers off the top of my head. I know he did great last week. Russell Gage started off this season 9 for 114, 6 for 46, and a touchdown. And then he was pretty average for the most of the season. But then the last 2 weeks, 4 for 51 and a touchdown against the Saints, and then 5 for 82 against the Chargers last week. Tampa Bay this week, I think with Julio out of the lineup, he has some nice upside. I think he's the guy that can get the job done, maybe as a flex play in 12, 14-man leagues, but not a guy I'd be terribly excited about or really lay on the line for in these big games. Pick 4, James Robinson, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, and Jonathan Taylor. If I'm not mistaken, my man, there's only 4 options to pick there, so I'll pick 3. That might be a typo. I think the guy I would leave out of this list is, unfortunately, I think you got to sit down Miles Sanders. I mean, we saw the Browns be able to run against the Ravens last week, so I have hope for James Robinson. I think the only threat we've really seen to his fantasy value this year is whether or not the Jags can keep up in their football games and remain relevant and within the realm of winning the football game. Because obviously if they're getting blown out, they're not going to run the football and they're going to abandon the run if they're getting smoked. So David Montgomery, I like him a lot against the Vikings as an average unit, but Montgomery's on a hot streak right now. And then with Jonathan Taylor, I love the matchup. He's probably your best option this week. Miles Sanders, super high upside, but a little bit more risk. I'd leave him out. CEH, Mecole Hardman, or KJ Hamler at your flex spot this week. I think I would end up going with probably, I don't love Hardman against a tough Saints defense. KJ Hamler, he's really hit or miss. He only had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns last week, I'm pretty sure. Hamler, I really liked coming out of Penn State. I thought he was super talented, really fast player, and could be used nicely. He had 2 for 86 and 2 touchdowns. When you look at this guy, his highest reception total of the year is 6 against Atlanta. So I don't really think you can trust him too much. I'd probably go CEH here. Hope he can rack up some nice receptions, find the end zone maybe. I think as a rusher, he's going to be kind of tough this week. A tough play against that Saints unit. Maybe you can make a case. CEH, a smaller guy, shifty, gets lost in the line and bounces free for a couple of explosive carries, but not a guy I'm thrilled about this week. Samuel is wondering about Ayuk or Terry at your wide receiver 2 spot this week. I love Terry McLaurin. I think he's a really, really, really good player. And with Dwayne Haskins coming back, that might honestly raise his ceiling a bit. But coming off 2 dud games, I think you got to go Ayuk against the Cowboys. It's definitely a risk. It's something that I don't think a lot of people would tell you to do. But Dallas's defense, that secondary, they're banged up. They're pretty dang bad. And in his last 5 games, we haven't seen Ayuk go under, I believe it's 75 yards receiving, and he's had a touchdown in all those games. I'll pull up Ayuk's stats here, but they're pretty dang impressive in his last 5 eligible matchups. Ayuk, since week 7, has 115 yards against the Pats, 91 and a touchdown against Seattle, 7 for 75 and a touchdown against the Saints, 5 for 95 and a tub against the Bills, and 10 for 119 against the football team. So he's asserting himself as a very valuable player for that 49ers offense. And with Samuel off the field, especially against Dallas, I think you can't really pass up on that one too much. Who should I start? Michael Thomas, Ayuk, Terry, Woods, or Thielen. So 2 of the same players in this situation. I think it comes down to either Michael Thomas or Ayuk. I would say if you need high upside, Andrew, I think you go with Ayuk here. But if you're looking for a safe floor and a guy who can be really productive, I'd go Michael Thomas and Drew Brees' return here. Matthew played Herbert last night, and he must be in a super flex league because he is asking if he should play Russ or pick up Brees and hope for a shootout. I think Russ is going to have a couple turnovers against the Washington football team this week. I think Brees will be pretty clean. I think he'll be pretty effective in this game, pretty fresh against the Chiefs, and in a high score, I think that might be the way to go. Russ has been trending down in fantasy here for the better part of a month, I would say. Let's look at his numbers here just to kind of hit on what I'm talking about here. But Russ Wilson had back-to-back 14-point games against Philadelphia and the Giants. 22 against the Jets was that last week. A bit of a redeemer, but only 19 against the Cardinals and then 9 against the Rams. So since Week 10, Russell Wilson kind of fell out of the MVP discussion and has been a much lesser fantasy player than he was to start things out here. But yeah, I think I go with Brees. Swift, Gallman, Cooper, or T.Y. at your full PPR flex. I think... Okay, so Amari Cooper has got the 49ers this week. 49ers are hit or miss. They can either let up a huge game or they can be pretty locked down. I think I might honestly toss T.Y. Hilton in there. I love the matchup. He's been a Houston Texans killer his whole career. That's a great matchup for him. He's been playing great as of late with Phillip Rivers. So let's go T.Y., lock that one in. I think you want some nice, safe consistency in there, So let's toss Wayne Gallman in there as well. And then I think you decide between Cooper or Swift based on whether or not Stafford suits up. If we see Matthew Stafford playing on Sunday, you're going to want Swift in there. Otherwise, I would feel comfortable going Cooper as well as a high-risk, high-reward player additionally there. Who is my favorite tight end streamer this week? A great question, Matthew. Dallas Goedert, Jared Cook. Sorry, I blanked on him there. He played for my Packers, man. Or Irv Smith. Irv Smith with Kyle Rudolph, a report came out not too long ago. I believe Kyle Rudolph is doubtful for that game, so we might not see him there at all. I think that Jared Cook has been too inconsistent this year. I think your safest bet is Dallas Goedert, though. I mean, he's been racking up receptions. He was modest against the Saints last week, but that's been an improving defense every week. It really got exploited against the run last week and not necessarily through the air. 4 for 43, very modest last week, but he's been a tight end 1 before that. I think I'd stick with Goddard, or if you really want to roll the dice and go for some high upside, Irv Smith's been very productive at times as well. Michael Thomas or T.Y. Hilton this week. I think you got to go with MT for the safe floor here. I really like MT, and especially with Brees coming back. Match up a lot, but if you're looking for some consistency here, which I think you should be in the fantasy playoffs, Michael Thomas is the way to go. Amari Cooper or Deontay Johnson, full PPR. I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson against the Bengals. Most targeted player on the Steelers offense. He's been pretty darn good at times this year. He struggled last week against the Bills, but so did that whole football team. So not too worried about Deontay. Well, I'd rather start Swift or Carson at running back 2 this week. Andrew, I think you got to stay tuned. Keep looking up DeAndre Swift. Check in on that Lions practice schedule and see how Matthew Stafford is come game time. Because I think if we see Matthew Stafford on the field, DeAndre Swift's value goes up exponentially. Whereas Chris Carson, we know that he is seeing a decline in touches here since coming back from that foot injury. And with a tough front 7 here, really, really tough front 7 against Washington. Those guys have top-end picks all over the field, and they've got some really good players up there. I think Carson struggles a bit for that Seahawks team here this week and is a bit of a touchdown-dependent play. So if we see Stafford, go Swift there. Otherwise, no Stafford. I think you try and hope Carson finds the end zone. Lazard or Antonio Brown here. I love Lazard. I'm a Packer fan. I think he's a pretty darn good player, very tough guy, scores touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers trusts him. But I think you got to go with Antonio Brown here against the Falcons. I mean, the guy who is probably going to see the third lightest coverage load on that team, obviously Evans will probably draw their top corner. The slot guy or their top slot guy will go to Godwin. And I think Antonio Brown will kind of command the worst guy in that starting defense. So I think you got to go AB there. What's going on, James? Thanks for stopping by the stream, man. Happy to see you here. Start Godwin or Corey Davis. I love Corey Davis. Super talented, but you got to go with Godwin. Great matchups. Safe floor if he gets the opportunities. I mean, this guy was a target monster last season, and I've been talking about how he's kind of the perfect build for Tom Brady. He's that underneath guy who runs all the routes well, and he's a dependable option to check it down to and then get yards after the catch. We just haven't seen him be used quite as highly as I expected this year. Obviously, seeing what he could do after the catch last season with Jameis, I thought he would have a better season, but start Godwin or I just did that one. And then Colton, my buddy who's a Saints fan, is just tuning in here to let you guys know to be cautious about Michael Thomas this week. His foot is actually acting up a little bit right now, it sounds like. And if he doesn't play their wide receiver... If he doesn't play, is there a wide receiver that could become a flex play for the Saints? I think that maybe a super deep stretch for a flex play out of the Saints offense is Traquan Smith. He has had his moments so far this season. He hasn't been the most consistent guy in the world, but I think what you really look for if he is not on the field this week, I think Michael Thomas will play. He's one of those guys who just kind of had a roller coaster this season. I think Emmanuel Sanders is the guy you look to. I mean, he's the guy that can get it done down the field. He's the guy that can produce there. And I think that we will see Michael Thomas, but if we do not see him, Emmanuel Sanders is the way to go. What's going on, Roy Kim? Happy to see you stop around the stream here, man. Did my stream lose connection? Uh-oh. All right, I'm not sure if the stream lost connection, but it seems like it's fine now. I really need to figure out how to fix my internet, you guys, because it's kind of not being so good right now. And then New Vision is wondering about Tannehill or Drew Brees this week. I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. I think that Drew Brees is the way to go here. Tannehill, I like his ceiling, but with uncertainty whether or not Matthew Stafford is going to end up playing, I think that that's a bit of a concern there. I think if he doesn't play, the Titans end up just routing the Lions, and then there's no incentive or reason for the Titans to pass the football. I mean, Tennessee is going to have their day running the ball, and then I think they're going to be able to set up play-action passes and hit A.J. Brown over the top. So I'd be a bit careful with Tannehill this week, especially with Brees on the other side in a matchup where he's going to have to score points to win that football game. So keep bringing your questions in here, you guys. Only got 2 more left. Otherwise, we'll have to figure out something else to talk about. But Samuel Garcia is wondering about at his flex whether or not he should start Scary Terry, Miles Sanders, DeAndre Swift, or Corey Davis. I think that the best way to go here is probably I really like Terry, I really like Swift, I really like Sanders. I think I'd keep Corey Davis out of it for what I just talked about regarding Ryan Tannehill and that Titans offense potentially playing Chase Daniel in a not-so-hot Lions football team. So, and a team I don't think can score the ball without Stafford on the field for that matter. By the way, quick Lions update here. A report came out today that Kenny Golladay actually would like to play this season, but right now it's trending in the direction that they might just shut him down for the rest of the year. I don't think that he's necessarily a guy who's in a contract dispute right now. I know that's been a bit of a rumor out there. Kenny Golladay, though, we haven't barely seen him on the field this year, and they want to get him out there. He wants to be out there, but they're going to manage their risk with their superstar wide receiver and see if he's able to come out or not. So, yeah, he got pretty upset today. Someone suggested that he's purposely sitting out in a contract dispute, and he shut that down pretty quick. He was not a fan of that. And he also mentions here, I just looked him up, that he would like to re-sign with Detroit on a long-term deal. So, good news for Lions fans there, as they tend to win football games when Kenny's on the field. But anyways, Samuel, back to your question. I think that at your flex, I would go Sanders or Scary Terry. I think they both have significant risk. I mean, Scary Terry, 2 bad games in a row here, and then Miles Sanders, obviously, until last week, has been a bit of a dud the last month or so. So, if you want full PPR, man, this is a tough one, but I think I'm going to go Scary Terry there by just a hair against the Seahawks, who struggled all year defensively. And then with Dwayne Haskins coming back into the lineup, Terry McLaurin is the guy that he's going to look to throw the football to. As long as Terry's healthy. I know he's been dealing with some injury issues. Let's see how he's practicing this week. Terry McLaurin, he's progressing. Yeah, I guess we don't have to be worried about his health this week. I know that was a bit of an issue last week. He came in questionable, but he seems to be doing fine now. So I think I go Scary Terry against the Seahawks defense. Long story short there. Cole Kmet or Noah Fant, full PPR? This is a good question here. Cole Kmet's actually been highly utilized in that Bears offense. Throughout the season, we've kind of seen him increased in his snap count and be used pretty well, I'd say. And for a guy who I thought that Jimmy Graham was going to be a pretty decent fantasy option, and he was for the first month and a half or so of the season and caught a lot of touchdowns, Cole Kmet has kind of came in there and snagged some of those away and been used pretty nicely. So here in the last couple of weeks, Cole Kmet, has 5 for 37 and a touchdown against Detroit, and then 4 for 41 against Houston. So I still think you might not want to play him over Noah Fant yet this season, though. Fant, we've seen when he's healthy and can stay in the game, is a pretty darn good option. So I think I'd stay with Fant there. Pick 2, Michael Thomas, Brandon Ayuk, or Miles Sanders. So, Carl, I think we're going to have to stay up to date here on Michael Thomas. I really like his matchup this week, and I think he will ultimately play, but not practicing because of a foot injury right now. I think you got to monitor a little bit there. My Saints insider Colton actually updated me that he did not practice today. So, and then your other guys are Ayuk or Miles Sanders. I think you got to go with Ayuk against Dallas. That matchup is super good. And I think that Miles Sanders is certainly a guy I like in fantasy going forward if he can produce again this week. But based on how Ayuk's been doing the last month here and with the matchup, I can't pass up on him. Who do I play at flex, full PPR? Thielen, Woods, Terry McLaurin, and Chris Carson or Swift. So full PPR, I think I'm going to stay away from Thielen this week, even though I think he is Kirk Cousins' favorite target. Only 4 grabs for 43, but managed to score 2 touchdowns in the last time out against the Bears. Woods has a really safe floor, but not really sure how much meaningful football he's going to get against the Jets. Terry McLaurin, I think, is a really solid option here with a football team that is switching over back to Dwayne Haskins because Alex Smith won't be in the lineup due to that calf injury. So Chris Carson, a little bit worried about the Washington football team front. And then Swift, we don't know if we'll see Stafford. So I think Terry McLaurin's the way you go there, Andrew, and your flex. Which Panthers wide receiver do you think will do the best this week? Now, there's a lot of variables that affect this. Obviously, being a Packer fan, I know my team inside and out, and I try to look at them from the most unbiased perspective that I can. So whoever draws the coverage from Jair Alexander is probably going to have the quietest game of the bunch. Now, Robbie Anderson is the most targeted guy in that offense. He's Teddy Bridgewater's favorite target, I'd argue. But I think in terms of depth chart and how opposing teams view that football team, I think they look at DJ Moore as the one there. So I wouldn't be entirely sure whether or not we're going to see Jair Alexander on DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson. I think the higher talent is DJ Moore. I think he's the better football player. But the productive guy this year has been Robbie Anderson, and that's not really arguable. I mean, he's been fantastic with Bridgewater on the field. And we saw Bridgewater leave for a game, and then DJ Moore was the more favored guy. So I think that's a bit of a coin flip there, a bit of a risky situation. But what I really like is Curtis Samuel out of the slot. I think that with his value as a rusher and his ability to just be dynamic and explosive, I think he'll have a nice game because of the 3. I think Samuel is the guy who's been productive and will certainly not see that shadow coverage from Alexander. So I would feel most comfortable with Samuel at my flex spot this week. And for a guy who was on quite the rampage, he's cooled off a little bit, but Curtis Samuel is certainly a viable option for lineups. Just to highlight what he did over a stretch of the season. 13, 19, 21.5, and then he had a bit of a lapse against Tampa Bay, but then 17 against Detroit, 9.5 against Minnesota, and 11.5 against Denver, all in half PPR scoring. So Curtis Samuel has been a very viable option this season for fantasy teams. Carl's wondering about Lamar or Hurts. This is a good question here. Ravens could run all game, and Lamar might not have to do too much. I agree with you, Carl. I would say the one thing, being a Packer fan, I watched the Jags play my team this year. Those guys play physical. They play passionate football. They are not the most talented group in the world, but they play hard, and they actually gave us quite the fit in the run game. We were not too productive against that team. And I think that if they're going to run the football, that production is going to have to come out of Lamar Jackson. I think Dobbins has the ability to explode, score touchdowns, big plays. But in terms of an actual yards per clip, against the Jags, what I saw from us at least is it tended to be like 1, 2, 3 yards, and then you'd bounce it for 9. And it was just kind of a repeated cycle of nothing chunk plays. So I think that Lamar could do some damage this week, and I think that a guy I really like this week is Mark Andrews, his tight end. But I totally see where you're coming from here. I think Hurts 100% is going to run the football against the Cardinals and will be that top option, obviously, in fantasy for that Eagles team. So I loved what I saw from Hurts last week, and I think you could justify taking this move and going with Hurts over Lamar, but it's a bit risky. It's kind of a gutsy play there. I would probably go with Lamar myself, but there's a world out there where you can go with Jalen Hurts. How do I think Cam Akers will do? I think Cam Akers is going to be pretty dang productive this week. We've seen him come off 2 back-to-back performances with 20 or more touches, and he's had 3 games with either a touchdown or over 100 yards from scrimmage. So I really like what he's doing right now. McVay's unleashed him in that offense, and he's being highly productive. And then I think this week against the Jets, I know they're solid up front. Their D-line is the strength of that defense. But Cam Akers is going to get so many attempts this week. I think the Rams will blow the Jets out of the water, and they'll just be controlling that clock, running the football, winding that game down. And I think Akers, we could see have another 25 to 28 touches this week. So he only needs to hit the edge once, and this guy explodes and he's gone. I loved him out of Florida State. He's a really talented running back. So I think Cam Akers is a must-start player this week. I had him in my running backs video from a couple days ago. Ryan Tannehill or Hurts for upside. I played Herbert last night in a 4 passing touchdown league. Okay, so you're going for upside here, Matthew. I think that you want to go with Hurts if you're looking for upside. Tannehill certainly has a safe floor, and I think is a guy who's a bit more risky. I mean, we're going to see the Titans be able to run the ball all day against Detroit, and the play-action game is really where Tannehill thrives. Runs the ball a bit here and there, but I think that, like I said, play-action game is where they want to go in Tennessee for production. So Hurts against the Cardinals, I think he'll have his opportunities to run on the edge. I think he'll be able to throw the football decently against that team as well. And as long as he doesn't have the turnover issue, he should be pretty good this week. And for upside, you love guys with the rushing upside. That gives you some really, really nice ceiling there. Emmanuel is wondering about Hunt or McKissick this week. And I'll be honest, I need to check in on how the Washington running backs did last week in the absence of Gibson. J.D. McKissick is not your traditional running back. He's a guy that lines up in the slot and is honestly used more as a receiver than he is as a running back. But against San Francisco last week, that seems to have flipped a little bit. 11 for 68 and only 2 grabs opposed to what we've been seeing him. I mean, just a week prior, he had 10 for 70 against Pittsburgh. So I think if you're in a PPR league, you can really justify going with McKissick. And then Barber was the guy who the game that we saw the injury occur to Gibson was the one who really took over, 14 for 23 and a touchdown against Pitt, but not a terribly effective running back on the ground, 12 for 37 last week. The Browns playing the Giants this week, I think it'll be a bit of a low score, so if you're in a full PPR league, I think the way you lean is towards J.D. McKissick. I think he'll get more opportunities, just being the more true level starter in that offense without Gibson out there, who's doubtful this week. I really love Hunt. His talent's excellent. If he was a starter on a football team, he'd be a top 5 running back prospect. But with him not out there in that role and Chubb being the clearly dominant guy, I think McKissick's the way to go. J.K. Dobbins or Michael Thomas. Thomas re-injured his ankle, might not be 100%. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from there, man. My buddy Colton just let me know that he was dealing with that foot injury as well and did not practice today. So that's a big news there. Obviously, Drew Brees coming back bodes very well for him, and I think he'll have a really nice game. But if he's not able to play or not play at 100%, we saw how Keenan Allen did last night with a hamstring injury. Those lower body injuries can be quite naggy and really upset your fantasy leagues. So I think you just keep an eye on it. I would go Michael Thomas in full PPR if he's 100% and going to play by game time. But play it ear by ear. If he's not looking good pregame, I'd go Dobbins there. Aaron Jones or Stephon Diggs this week. I think you got to go with Diggs, honestly, against the Bills. He's got the higher upside. I talked a little bit about earlier this week on a previous stream and in today's stream a little bit how Aaron Jones' volume and his workload has been kind of cut in half in terms of touchdown production from 2019, where he had 19. So that's a huge red flag. I mean, Stephon Diggs, a guy who's blowing the top off of defenses right now, he's got the much higher upside. And against Denver, I think he can get it done pretty nicely. Juju or Jeff Wilson for your flex. I put Herbert on the bench for Kyler. Larkin, my man, I'm sorry that you didn't start Herbert last night, but I think that Kyler will still have a good game, so you don't really need to worry too much there. And I'd go Jeff Wilson if Mostert's out. I think that Juju, honestly, I'm not a huge Juju Smith guy. I loved him as a rookie, but every year he just hasn't wowed me since then. I think Jeff Wilson's the safer play to go if Mostert's off the field because he should get some nice volume and goal line carries. Mr. Yang is wondering about James Robinson or Robbie Anderson in full PPR. I think you got to go with James Robinson this week. We saw the Browns, Chubb, and Hunt have highly productive games against Baltimore last week, and James Robinson's one of the more consistent running backs in the league all season long. Obviously, pick up of the year. This guy off the waiver wire week 1. Insane grab. I bet he was drafted in almost no leagues because by the time it was announced that he was going to be the starter for that Jags offense this season, I'm sure a lot of people had already drafted their leagues and completed that process. So Personally, in my leagues, I added James Robinson in all of them. And in leagues where I lost Dak Prescott, he was huge, huge as a trade asset, getting me some really, really key players on my team. So I think he can still produce here down the stretch. Evan Brewer wondering about Cam Akers or Myles Gaskin this week. I love them both, but I think I'd go with Akers. I love Gaskin's matchup, and I had actually advised some teams to start him this week against New England if he's out there. But for Cam Akers, a guy who's been playing hot lately, I don't think you can sit him down for him. Emmanuel, I think I talked about Hunt or McKissick a little bit not too long ago, but I think I'd go with McKissick here. He's the more true starting running back at this point in the season. Obviously, Hunt, far and away a more talented player, but I think that he really needs that passing volume to have that high upside. Great talent. If he was a starter on any given team, he'd be a top 5 fantasy running back, but we are seeing him in games this year when the Browns aren't really trailing and when they control the pace, they go Chubb, and sprinkle in a little bit of Hunt there, but where he really gets that great value is when he is being used as a receiver and a guy who can get a lot of yards after the catch. New Vision, thanks, you're good. I appreciate it, man. Or at least if you're talking to someone else in the chat there, good for them. But I'm not sure if you're talking to me or not. So I'll just assume it was a compliment to me. Thank you very much, my guy. I am very glad to have all of you guys on the stream here. And thank you guys for stopping by and taking a little bit of time out of your day to visit the channel. Giovanni is wondering about J.K. Dobbins or Damian Harris or Myles Gaskin this week. So I think, here's my thoughts on this, Giovanni. I think that J.K. Dobbins is a slightly risky but really high upside play at your running back spot. I think Damian Harris might be the odd guy out here. I think in standard leagues he's pretty darn solid, but Harris has not been a guy who's been all that involved in the passing game so far this season. I mean, on the year he has 4 catches, so not really a highly touted guy in PPR leagues. And with that Pats offense kind of sputtering right now, playing Miami this week, I wouldn't be too all over him. But I would say this. I think that if Myles Gaskin suits up and plays this week, I think he's a pretty darn solid option, and I might consider going that route for your teams. Against the Pats, we know what Cam Akers did to them last week. Myles Gaskin, they use him as a workhorse when he's out there. So if he clears COVID protocols, I'd go Myles Gaskin. Otherwise, I think J.K. Dobbins is a very fine pickup, but I think that you've got yourself 2 nice options there. T.Y. Hilton or Kiki QT this week. I'm going to go with T.Y. Hilton there. I think T.Y. is a guy who has an extremely high ceiling this week and a player that can do some really good things for that Colts offense against the Texans. Obviously, Kiki's been pretty productive with Will Fuller off the field, but last week he had a touchdown that kind of saved his value. Otherwise, he only had a couple catches. But, yeah, I'd go Hilton there. And then who should I start in my flex this week? Justin Jefferson, DeAndre Swift, Chris Carson, or Brandon Ayuk. I think I'd go Ayuk here. He's definitely a guy who I think has a great ceiling, is going to produce great numbers this week. He's being used a lot in that 49ers offense right now. And with Deebo Samuel going back to the injury list, probably not going to play this week or maybe not even at all this season. I think Ayuk is a great option and a guy with a massive ceiling. So that's where I'd go with that one. And then, so Emmanuel keeps commenting about Hunt or McKissick and half PPR. Emmanuel, I've answered this twice now. So basically, long story short, I picked McKissick. But if you want to hear my explanation on that, you can rewind the video just a couple minutes ago. I just talked about him within the last 5 minutes or so to see that. Quick note here, you guys. I just opened up a Patreon account. So if you guys are interested in supporting my content here and wanted to go over and do that and make a subscription to that, that would be very appreciated. It is certainly not required. It's just getting a little bit overwhelming to answer all of the questions on the comment section on my videos. So that way, if you guys are able to subscribe to the Patreon, you guys are 100% guaranteed responses to all of your questions. I would love, in an ideal world, to be able to have enough time to get to all of you guys in the comment section. But as we keep growing here as a channel and as a community, which I love to see, it's just getting increasingly harder and harder to do so. So I decided to open that up. There'll be exclusive content on the Patreon that only subscribers there will be able to see. I'll be posting videos, statistics. I'll have some merch there eventually. And a lot of cool stuff for you guys that are members exclusively. So 100% something that you guys don't have to do. I encourage it. It helps me out a lot and helps me keep doing the stuff here that I'm doing for this fantasy channel. It's Fizzle Fantasy Sports at patreon.com. If you guys are interested in that, it'd be a huge help to me. and be very appreciated. But like I said, I do these Q&As and stuff so I don't have to charge you guys anything extra for my services. I just want to be able to have a sustainable way to go about fantasy advice here and keep doing something I love. So awesome if you guys are interested in supporting me out in that facet of keep doing something I love. So awesome if you guys are interested in supporting me out in that facet of. We're going to wrap things up in about 10 minutes. I've been streaming for about an hour now, so I think that, where was my last spot here? Okay, so we're at who should I put in my flex? And I decided for Matt, I was going to end up going with Brandon Ayuk. And then I've got Justin Young, J.K. Dobbins, T.Y. Hilton, or Swift in standard leagues. You're thinking Hilton. I think you're on the right track there, Justin. Okay, I think my stream is down because if the stream is live, let me know, you guys. Otherwise, I think it might be down because right now my bit rate is super low, and I've got a bit of a cycle here going. My image is just circling. Yeah, I think we're having some technical difficulties here. Someone in the chat, if you guys are still around here, let me know if the stream is back up and running, and if you guys can either hear or see me, because right now I'm not sure whether or not anything is working, so besides my chat feed. So if you guys can hear or see me, let me know. Otherwise, I'm probably going to have to head out of here a bit early because the stream is not working. Okay, you guys can hear and see me. Awesome. Perfect, you guys. So I'll answer questions here for about 8 more minutes. I apologize. I need to figure out something with my connection and my internet. Right now, it just says the stream. It's got like that loading circle or whatever you want to call it. So thank you guys for responding to me and getting to me on that. We are having some issues there. But anyways, so do I think Michael Thomas will play this week? I was just kind of typing back to some of you guys while I was having troubles with the stream. Do I think he'll play this week? I think he will end up suiting up, but we have to keep a close eye on that because obviously if there is any chance he doesn't play or issues with his health, we aren't going to be able to see him, and that's going to be huge. So I think he will play. Keep an eye on it, and we might see him play. And if he does, I think he's a great option this week. If Stafford plays this week, Miles Sanders or DeAndre Swift, I think I'd go with Miles Sanders. I was actually in the process of typing that, and then you guys said the stream was good. So thank you guys, by the way. Anthony, Carlos, Guillermo, shout out to you guys for letting me know the stream was back up and running because we were having some issues. There's something I definitely need to look into here because there was some issues with that going on. But anyways, I was in the process of saying Miles Sanders I think is the way to go this week. I love Swift as a talent, but both of them have their risks, high risk, high reward type players. Miles Sanders got back on track last week, high volume, high yardage, high production in a 2-touchdown game, capping it off with an 80-yard score. So, excuse me, I think I'd go Miles Sanders this week against the Cardinals, a pretty average unit against the run. Miles Sanders or Michael Thomas. And we've got Hurts or Brees here. I don't want to skip Anthony here really quick, so I'm going to get to that. I think that ultimately you can't really go wrong with this, but I think that Hurts I really like here as a rusher against the Cardinals. And I think Brees will be highly productive against the Chiefs, but I'd go Jalen Hurts just because of that rushing value. Miles Sanders or Michael Thomas, I'm going to go with MT this week. I think Miles, I'm going to go with MT this week. I think that if he's able to suit up, which I think he will, like I said, keep an eye on it. Miles Sanders is a fine option if he doesn't play. But I think against the Chiefs, especially in full PPR leagues, I think I really like Michael Thomas. against the Philadelphia Eagles. Or, excuse me, my goodness, man. Against the Kansas City Chiefs. You're in a standard league, and you had Eckler last night, and the other guy had Henry. So, I'm assuming you're not referring to Henry Ruggs. You're referring to Derrick Henry. So, Jeremiah, unfortunately, Eckler kind of underperformed last night, which really sucks. I was hoping for a big game from him. That Vegas defense is terrible, and they actually fired their old DC and brought in a new guy, and their entire focus and emphasis that game was to shut down the run, which they had been getting gashed by for weeks. And Rod Marinelli came in and basically just did run-fitting blitzes the whole game, and it was really frustrating to watch. I was at work, and I was watching on my phone while I was doing some stuff, and everywhere I looked, they'd hand off to Eckler, and there'd be 12 guys around the ball. I mean, like between the guys in the box and the offensive linemen, it was just a swarm of bodies, and there wasn't really any space. And Eckler really didn't do anything until the end of the game. He had like a 30-yard carry. So Eckler, I love him, though. He's a great receiving back, one of the best dynamic guys in the league. And I think a guy going forward, if you can win that matchup, is going to be a really nice asset for your team. And I would hope, Jeremiah, for your sake, if that's Derrick Henry on the other side of that matchup. Okay, I just realized what you're saying here. He had Henry, so that, as in Hunter Henry. I think that's unfortunate. I told a couple people the other day that Hunter Henry was a good streaming option at tight end this week with the injuries to Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So, and then Henry had a day. So, unfortunately for you, I was right on that take. Hunter Henry, I believe, had a touchdown on the opening possession. 5 for 61, a touchdown, 14.5 fantasy points. Clearly outperformed his expectations. So hopefully you're able to bounce back from that, man. But that's a tough game for you on both ends there. So apparently MT is hurt, and if he plays, then he might be a decoy. Should I move A.J. Brown from flex to wide receiver 2 and then flex Gallman? I already got burned my Keenan Allen, so I need to save points. Yeah, Christian, absolutely. I think that A.J. Brown, definitely safe. Gallman, definitely a safe play. If there's any concern that Michael Thomas is going to be a decoy, get him out of your lineups. Stay up to date on that news. Only Friday, so clearly we have to stay put into Saturday and then pregame warm-ups. Jay Glazer for you guys on the Fox pregame, a great source for in and outs and whether or not they're going to be limited or not. So look for that. Adam Schefter on Twitter, Ian Rappaport, great guys pregame as well. But I think Jay Glazer has the best background for injuries and whatnot. I know kicker questions are kind of dumb. No, man, no problem, my man. I love talking about kickers. It's kind of funny. But you need as many points as possible. Are there any notable kickers you think have a good chance of dropping some big points this week? Carlos, I'm going to need a list of guys on your waiver wire if you want me to dive into that, because it's kind of hard for me to just kind of guess names off the list. But I think, you know, if you just shoot me a list on one of my videos or comment on this video after the stream is over here in a few minutes, I should be able to pick out a guy I like his matchup. And then I would say this, though, Carlos, if you've got Young Wei Koo or Young Ho Koo, as I like to call him, definitely the best option there. I would go him every single day of the week over any kicker. Should I start Mike Davis, T.Y. Hilton, Jeff Wilson, or Amari Cooper? Pick 2. So this week, my man, I think you're going to have to go with Mike Davis and T.Y. Hilton. I think it's a really nice combination. Mike Davis has a great matchup against the Packers. A safe floor. Christian McCaffrey last season. Obviously, Davis isn't as talented, but he had a big day against them, and Green Bay's run stop's been pretty poor. And then T.Y. Hilton is a Houston Texans killer. That guy, his whole career, if you go look up a T.Y. Hilton highlight tape, about 3/4 of it are against the Texans because he just flames them in 2 matchups every year. So I love T.Y. Hilton this week. I think Cooper's a boom-bust play, and Jeff Wilson's safe and standard, but I think you've got some better options there. I benched my MT solely on the fact Brees playing he just doesn't seem to throw to him. I mean, Drew Brees and Michael Thomas set the record last season for most receptions in a single season, but I guess if what you're saying is this year, I mean, he has been quiet, underperforming this year. And if MT's out there as a decoy this week, I'd be careful with him and maybe sit him down. I was super high on him at the start of the stream until I heard that he had a foot injury. I still think he's a really nice play in PPR if he's healthy and ready to go for that game. But, I actually think his value goes up with Brees this week against the Chiefs if he is healthy and ready to play, because they're going to have to score points. But I can 100% see where you're coming from. Michael Thomas has been very underwhelming as a guy who was probably a first-round pick in leagues this year. Claypool or Boyd this week? I think, honestly, I'm going to go with Claypool. That's a tough one. I don't really particularly love either of those wide receivers. Boyd with, Ryan Finley right now for the Bengals is just not a good option. And then, actually, it's not Ryan Finley. Who is the starter for Cincinnati right now? I just kind of stopped paying attention to them after we saw Joe Burrow go down, because their running game is dead. Their passing game is also dead. That line is terrible. Whoever's back there, quarterback, is just getting abused. Yeah, that's right. Brandon Allen played for Denver last season. I don't particularly love Boyd. He did really good on one catch before getting ejected against the Dolphins, but I think both of those, you might want to look for better options there. How do I feel about Brady this week? I think Tom Brady can have a pretty nice day. It's just going to depend on how much they pass the ball and how effective they are in actually converting those pass attempts. So I think if Tom Brady finds space, it's a really, really good matchup. He should be a top 12 play, probably a top 6 or 8 play, but obviously not great against Minnesota last week. Would I consider Chris Carson over Michael Thomas? I think you can consider it in PPR leagues, but I wouldn't make the move until right before game time. Chris Carson has a really tough matchup, whereas I think Michael Thomas has nice upside against the Chiefs. So I would be conservative with that one and just kind of wait things out there, because I think Chris Carson's touchdown dependent this week, to be honest. Chubb or Aaron Jones? Drew, I got to go with Nick Chubb. As a Packer fan, I'll swallow my pride here. You got to go Nick Chubb. Aaron Jones, his touchdown count from 2019 has been sliced in half this year, and Nick Chubb's been a baller, so it's Chubb on this one. Aaron Jones or Miles Sanders? I think you got to go with Aaron Jones, whereas Miles Sanders, I think, is maybe even more talented than Aaron Jones is. I think that just the situation offensively benefits Aaron Jones more. He sees more touches on a game-to-game basis. He's a more consistent fantasy play. Devontae Adams or Derrick Henry? All right, this is kind of fun here. We've got some this player or that player going on. I think you got to go. This is a tough one. You've got my wide receiver 1 overall for the rest of the season, for the entire season this year. Back in June, I picked Adams as my wide receiver 1 for 2020. Or you've got Derrick Henry, who I've been on for about 5 weeks here as my running back 1 here down the stretch of the playoffs. I think it depends, honestly, if you're in standard or PPR. Derrick Henry doesn't have much of reception upside. Devontae Adams, he got 14 touchdowns in his 13 games played or something this season. Tay has missed a handful of games, and he's wide receiver 2 right now. Devontae Adams, 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 touchdowns in only 11 games played. So I think that that's pretty impressive there. My man Seth with a $5 donation. Thank you, my guy. I'll skip over a couple of questions and get to you, and then I'll loop back around for the guys in front of you. But since you donated, I just want to say thank you so much. It's really appreciated. Definitely not required here on Q&As, but whatever you've got helps me out a ton. So thank you so much for that. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. T.Y. Hilton or Beasley in your flex? And would you play one of them over Chris Godwin? So I think if you're in full PPR here, Seth, I think it's very reasonable to maybe consider Cole Beasley over Godwin. I think I would, in an ideal world, love to start all 3 of these guys. T.Y. Hilton's been a Texans killer, and Cole Beasley against the Broncos this week. I love his upside. So I think this is a tough choice, man. I think based off what we've seen from Tampa Bay the last couple of weeks here, there is some reason to be concerned. Godwin did play through that pin being removed in his finger the other day, but I still think we got to be cautious with him. I think your highest upside highest upside play is T.Y. Hilton, and maybe your safest guy is Cole Beasley. Let's see here. Cole Beasley against the Steelers, 5 for 41, but that was a pretty defensive game. Some of you guys are saying, hold on, Seth, for just a second here. Some of you guys are saying Michael Thomas just got ruled out. So if this is actually news here, that is 100% something to talk about. Michael Thomas, 58 seconds ago, is out for Sunday's game against the Chiefs. Thank you guys for putting that in the chat. Obviously, I'm not checking live updates as things are happening here. So, yeah, Anthony, I think now you go Hurts over Brees for sure. Losing your top target offensively is a huge deal. And I especially think that Michael Thomas, being one of the more talented wideouts, or at least in fantasy, one of the most productive guys, is a huge deal. So, Hurts over Brees, absolutely. But back to Seth here. I think you go maybe with T.Y. and Godwin. I really love the matchup, and I want to believe in Chris Godwin. I think that it's a perfect pairing of an extremely high ceiling in both players, but especially T.Y. Hilton. And then Godwin is an extremely talented guy that can get the job done. I love Beasley this week, but he's just not quite the caliber of a player of Chris Godwin. So I would start Chris Godwin at wide receiver, flex T.Y. Hilton. Back up to the couple people I skipped there after that donation from Seth. Very generous of Seth there. Appreciate that so much, man. Brandon Cooks or Corey Davis for my flex asking is Rex. So this week, I think, Cooks could come back from that neck injury. Obviously, that kept him out of last game. Being Deshaun Watson's top target in that offense, I think that is the way that you end up going here, and probably the most advantageous spot for your team, probably the most upside there. I think Davis is great on a week-to-week boom-bust play basis, but not your most reliable guy. Cooks was limited in practice yesterday, so something that you need to keep an eye on there, but he could definitely suit up this week, and I think if he plays, will be a great option. Chris Godwin or Allen Robinson, I think you go A-Rob here. I got to wrap up the stream here, you guys, so I'm going to fire through these last couple of questions. Logan Paul or Floyd Mayweather? I think I got to take Floyd Money Mayweather, my guy. MT is out. Yep, that's big news. Obviously, if you are just tuning in, Drew Brees just took a big hit in fantasy after he just came back. But that's great news for Kamara owners. So what am I kidding here? Alvin Kamara is going to have a huge day without MT out there. And I think that Emmanuel Sanders or Traquan Smith might be guys who deserve some consideration as well. Boyd or Fournette this week? I see where you're coming from. Drew talking about Boyd or picking Boyd there, but Ronald Jones is on the COVID list. If we don't see Ronald Jones this week, which is a very real possibility, Fournette's going to get the lead back carries. So Ronald Jones unlikely to play via CBS an hour ago. So if Fournette's the lead back, I think you got to go with Fournette, even though they might not run the football all that much. We've seen him be used out of the backfield and whatnot. So a solid option there. Colts D or Ravens D this week? Colts have the Texans. Ravens have the Jags. Ravens are super, super banged up, though. And let me look in here and see if the Jags have named Minshew their starter yet. If they have, then you certainly... Gardner Minshew expects Yannick Ngakoue to be out for blood this week. Wow. Okay, but it sounds like Gardner Minshew is looking like the starter after Glennon got benched last week. So I think you sit the Ravens defense. They're really banged up right now. And I think I'd stay away from them. So Colts D it is. They forced two turnovers against Watson last week, or the last time out 2 weeks ago. My bad. MT's officially out. Yes, he is, Adam. That is huge news for fantasy this week. Tannehill or Hurts? You got to go with Hurts this week. New vision. Breeze is out. Go with Hurts here. I love Tannehill. He's got a safe floor, but Hurts' rushing value gives him a really nice ceiling that I like. Wayne Gallman, Pittman, or Robert Tonyan at flex. I love Tonyan as a Packer fan. You see in the background here. I love Green Bay, but I think that it's best to only start one tight end in your lineup. So obviously, I think if you're not starting Robert Tonyan, who's a top 5 tight end play the rest of this year, I think you stay away from him and go with Wayne Gallman. Yep, I agree with that one, Drew. Alrighty, you guys, any last-minute questions here? Otherwise, I got to head out. Remember, go check out my Patreon if you guys want to support me any extra here on the channel. It'd be really appreciated. Absolutely not required. Just throwing it out there for you guys. I'll have exclusive content on there for you guys, videos and whatnot. Guaranteed responses to all questions, like I said. My ideal world would be that I can answer every single one of you guys in the YouTube chat, but I'm just running out of time trying to get out content for you guys with my work schedule, schooling here, just running out of time in the day. So at least if you're on my Patreon, you know for a fact you're going to get answered And I do these live streams and whatnot so I can try and give you guys another way to be interactive with me and get as much out of this channel as possible. But thank you guys so much for stopping in today. I love each and every single one of you guys. Carlos is wondering here before I head out, Dobbins or Carson at flex since MT is out. Right now, I think I'd pencil Dobbins in there against the Jags. Chris Carson against the Washington football team is a tough matchup, so I'd be cautious about that one. And then Goff or Kyler Murray this week. I love Goff as a safe top 12 play, but can't sit Murray this week. Kyler Murray's too good in fantasy. Justin Jefferson versus the Bears or Robert Woods versus the Jets. I'm going to have to go with Jefferson, even if it isn't standard. Not sure how many meaningful snaps that Rams offense will get after they smoke them. So, sub true. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for stopping by. Yes, Christian, I hate Michael Thomas as well. He's a diva and whines like it's his job. So thank you so much for stopping by, you guys. I'll see you next time, next week. Drop any comments and questions you guys have in the comment section of any of my videos, and I'll try to get back to them. Otherwise, go head over to my Patreon. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace out.